Hi, my name's Joe Houghton, and this is the Plus One podcast. My guest today is William Davis, who jumped out to me a couple of weeks ago, the first time I heard him speak on a Zoom call we were on with the Innovation Academy. His obvious enthusiasm for the subject was just infectious. So I knew I had to invite him onto the podcast. So got in touch with him, and very kindly you said yes, you'd come and have a chat to us. So thanks very much for agreeing to come on, William.
That's really great. Pleased to be here. Infectious. That's one thing I haven't been called in a while, but
yeah, maybe
circumstances.
Thing that's probably not a good description to give anybody, is it? But sure. So William is an entrepreneur who set up Fab Lab in the USA, and I'm going to include a clip on Fab Lab later on because it's a fascinating clip that'll give you an insight into what it is, as well as William will probably tell us as well. He's also one of the founding members of the Nation of Makers, which is an organization established under the Obama administration to kind of help manufacturing return to the USA. He's had 20 odd years of retail experience with a number of companies, including Costco, in a variety of sales and product roles. And I think you've moved to Ireland.
I'm definitely here in Ireland.
So you've recently moved to Ireland to pursue an MBA at NUI Galway. Yeah, so
just finished just a few weeks ago. So
fantastic. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Well, I wondered how you were going to do the Innovation Academy role and be doing an MBA, but okay, so that's fine. Yeah. So William's just started with the Innovation Academy. He's either just started or he's in the process of starting. I mean, it's about now, isn't it, William?
Yeah. It's been pretty quick. So I started with the Innovation Academy. They wanted to bring me on quickly, so I want to say mid-April. Right. So as soon as my classes were generally formally done,
okay,
hit the ground running.
Fantastic. And we're recording this on the 29th of July. So you've been in a couple of months then, and you're kind of getting your feet under the table. And you've joined as a creative makers facilitator.
Yeah.
So we're going to decompress. We're going to deconstruct that in a little while. So kind of when I heard that description in the call that I was on earlier on with William and had a chat with him, I knew we had to kind of explore that area more, because this whole MakerSpace area was just totally new to me, and I love new. I love something I've never heard of before. And if you're watching this episode, you may have caught an earlier episode, one or two back, with Joel Leonard. And Joel is actually in the same kind of space and was referred on by William, but he was available the day I called him. In fact, I called him, we had a chat, and less than half an hour later we were recording the podcast. That's kind of
let's do this.
Roll. So yeah, I love the networking this podcast just opens up. It's fantastic. So in the pre-questionnaire interview that I ask everybody to do, William describes himself as passionately inspired. And I mean, it's that word again, isn't it? Passion. I don't know how many of my guests on this podcast have had passion as one of their words. So let's start with that. So why are you passionate about education, and kind of what fuels that? Why passion?
I don't know if I don't know if I could say why passion. I guess I'm just a very like intense person. Yeah. And so if I dive into something, whether it be research on 3D printing, or it be the dog, like I'm just like a researcher, so I love to kind of dig into everything and go to everything kind of wholeheartedly. And so I think that comes across. Like, I'm very relationship driven as well, and I try not to be like too passionate about that kind of stuff, but really getting to know people and being able to network and to bounce ideas off of them and sort of have that reciprocity is really what drives me. And that need for knowledge and for people definitely grew through my upbringing in my early kind of teen years. And
so take us through the story. Take us through your kind of progression to where you are today then.
So how did we get here?
Yeah.
Um, so I guess I would have to say like the most influential person on me in my sort of educational career were my parents. And my my dad and mom were very much working class, grew up in south of Seattle in Washington State in the US. And my dad was really, I guess what you call like a jack of all trades. And so just a very well-read, but very mechanically inclined individual and very friendly. They said he never met he never met an enemy. He always made friends wherever he went. And he had many roles in his lifetime. And so at one point he was a chemical engineer. And then he eventually became an industrial electrician. And just further on in his career, he had an industrial accident where he couldn't do electrical work anymore. And within months of recovery, he was already back in school at a technical college, learning drafting in architecture.
Okay.
so he always had that mind.
Yeah.
Exactly. And growing up, he was a guy who had power tools and cars and stuff at our house all the time. We had a good size kind of suburban property where we had a 4-car garage, and there was always kind of a project going on. And I was really young, just in my memories of him. Unfortunately, I lost him when I was 12 to lung cancer. But up until that point, I was able to he was able to bring me alongside in all of his passions and all of his little interests. And so I remember having this time when I got into his toolkit and took apart his nice Craftsman drill. And after the initial sort of yelling, he kind of came alongside me and said, "Okay, like if we're going to do this, let's put this thing back together the right way, right?" Yeah. And so
he was experience. Yeah, fantastic.
Exactly. So supportive of my curiosity, kind of, and that kind of went right on through to kind of get me into this interest in education, following him, because what he had done was, after his industrial accident, like I said, he had a lot of time where he couldn't work. And I was in elementary about that time, and our school had gotten some kind of a grant for computers,
right,
but they didn't have the staff, the grant didn't cover the staff for it. And this even happens in education today, where, say, a big organization will grant money for equipment, for 3D printers or laser cutters and things like that, but they won't follow up with the training on it or the staff to do it. And so this was a very early problem. So how he solved this was he volunteered his time to teach computing skills to the elementary school students. So he would teach, I think it was like 2 classes a week in my elementary. And he would teach
before all the bureaucracy came in about
just before all that, like he would just he would volunteer and do all that.
He just showed up and taught. Yeah.
Yeah. And so, like I say, this was mid 80s, early 90s, and I remember learning math by playing this game Number Munchers and Oregon Trail, on these little two-color computer screens, those little Apple IIes. And I guess that's what really, that's the legacy that really stuck with me. And from my mom's side, my mom grew up in a restaurant and had like a little family store and stuff that she worked in, and just worked hard. She worked hard in a restaurant for like 30 years. And so she was always providing for us. So while I didn't have as much sort of FaceTime with my mom, like she definitely had that work ethic that's like, no, you got to provide for your family, and you got to, be supportive and do all that. And so she would volunteer in my church services as a youth as well. So I got to have that aspect where my dad would watch over me during the day in school, and my mom would come in like on weekends and stuff, and she would help teach kind of the Sunday school classes there. So both people just very, not formal teachers, but very, very passionate about like education in general.
Yeah.
And
wow.
So,
yeah, fantastic formative experiences and wonderful role models to just base yourself around. Yeah, that's lovely.
And then, so just to kind of move on. So after I lost my dad, obviously a really hard time in my life. Yeah. My mom said, "Look," she's like, "I know you're angry. You're angry at you're angry at life, God, me, whatever. But she's like, it's really important that you that you be part of the church. She's like, I don't care if you go to service, go to Sunday school, whatever. She's like, just be there when the doors are open and hang out in the hallways, whatever you want to do, but just be there. And kind of on the side, she was speaking to one of our good friends who was like an older man, and said, "Hey, can you kind of mentor this? Mentor, little William or little Billy." And so he kind of brought me aside, and eventually they got me into missions work. And so, in that sense, I had a lot of teachers. While I didn't have my dad, I had a lot of teachers and a lot of men and women in my life that would take me on to missions work in Mexico, and we would do construction there. And so I was beginning to learn all those both soft skills of communicating with people and being able to express yourself healthily, but also to be able to get the skills like how to pour concrete, how to do some electrical work, how to use a tri-square, things like that. And I did that for 20 years. And so over that time, I came from the angry kid that's digging holes and, slinging bags of concrete on my shoulder to a guy who's actually organizing these things and teaching youth and other teens, sort of the practical skills, and to be able to work through a lot of that emotional stuff just with hard work and, and counseling and things like that. Yeah. But I took that from my own experience to be able to apply that aspect to my teaching. And, none of this was me formally standing in front of a classroom with a chalkboard or whiteboard or whatever. No. It was all hands-on, like, hey, here's how you tie wire for rebar. We're going to go out and build a wall, or we're going to go out and dig a trench or whatever. Yeah. But here's why it's important that you do this. So it's very hands-on, very, very experiential learning. Yes. And that's why I'm passionate about this stuff, because in order to connect with a teenager who's down there, who's had a hard life and finds himself in the middle of Mexico and it's 113 degrees Fahrenheit, that I'm telling him to dig a trench, you need to be able to connect with them, but also you need to be able to keep them motivated by not you can't just yell at them and say, dig further, work harder. You've got to have buy-in, and you've got to kind of get to the bottom of that stuff. So that's been really my philosophy as far as just teaching sort of formally and informally is, make it experiential, make it memorable, get really down into the why and the how as much as you get into the how. Yeah. And so that's kind of my background as far as that. Now, formal teaching, and we'll talk about this later, obviously, but I eventually came to an opportunity with my godfather where we opened up one of the first MakerSpaces. Fab Lab Tacoma is one of the first actually commercial or for-profit MakerSpaces in the United States. Okay.
And before you move forward into kind of that, just tell everybody, what is a MakerSpace?
Yeah. So
that's the thing that
it's kind of odd because
what's a MakerSpace?
Yeah. So, and I have to remember, so in Ireland, I don't think the term MakerSpace or Fab Lab is very well known. Where in the US it would be more so now. But so MakerSpaces are essentially a community workshop. My business partner used to refer to it as like a gym for nerds. And so instead of having treadmills and things like that, you come in and you use a laser cutter, or use a 3D printer, or you learn to weld, right? You're not taking yoga classes, you're learning how to sew. And just real, I don't know if it's practical, but real, meaty, engineering type crafting kind of stuff. Yeah. And typically these would work, at least the for-profit ones, they would work on a monthly membership model where you would pay $50 or $100 a month for access to the space. And at my space, what we would do, much like others, is we would say, okay, you're paying your $100 a month to come in, but in return, we're going to give you access to every single machine that we have on our, in our arsenal. Yeah. And so whether it's a laser cutter or a vacuum former, you have the opportunity to use this. But if you don't have the technical knowledge or any experience with this, we're going to give an opportunity to provide classes and training for this machinery. So if you came in off the street, knew nothing about 3D printing, we would offer a class for you to take, and you would be able to get up to speed and get you started on a project sort of right away.
So it's a bit like a gym membership where you you don't know how to use that weights machine or whatever, but we'll have somebody take you through it and show you first, and then you're up to using it. Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. Fantastic.
Yeah. And so the Fab Lab would be the more sort of widely used term, and Fab Lab is a network, and it was I have to remember where it came from. I can't remember if it came from I believe it came from MIT, but Fab Lab was kind of the formal name, and that was just that was around years before us, and that was an association of makerspaces, particularly at higher learning institutions, so colleges, where they would have established these community workspaces in their college, and usually they were funded by grants and things like that. Okay. And the only difference would be is they probably wouldn't charge a monthly fee. They would just be funded by the university themselves. But same concept, they would have classes and workshops and open access to machinery, and it would just be a great place to create and sort of.
What a brilliant idea! And I mean, these things still exist in the US, and that's presumably one of the things you're trying to do is bring this to Ireland as well. Because I mean, what about all the bureaucracy and the red tape of safety and
oh gosh, all that. So makerspaces, as they're more generically referred to, are thankfully becoming incredibly more common in the United States. The reason is that Obama had a big push for STEM and STEAM. So science, technology, let's see, I'm going to get it wrong, engineering and math. And so there was this core return in education to stop teaching to the test necessarily. So like in the US, it's really common because we have a lot of standardized testing and just for benchmarking purposes. And what happens was teachers were starting to eliminate the classes like home economics and woodshop and things like that in favor of just getting the kids to get what they need to get over the line, right, to pass the national exams. And sadly, the hands-on and social skills and the creativity kind of got put somewhat by the wayside in favor of this. But there was a noticeable gap happening where students that were coming into higher education didn't have a lot of these skills, and so there's been a refocus on experiential learning and creativity and math and science and that. And so this has created an opportunity for schools to get funding to now go over and build another wood shop, or to bring back home economics where you're sewing and baking and things like that in education. And it's really led to a more robust and sort of well-rounded experience for students. And so because of that refocus, it's opened up a lot of funding and a lot of opportunity for makerspaces to pop up all over the US. So whenever I was starting the makerspace 10 years ago, Fab Lab Tacoma, there were maybe 150 makerspaces spread all around the US, and they ranged from spaces that were good for like 10 people to giant places that had over 300 members, 400 members. Okay. But it was really just starting, and this concept of Fab Lab and workshops were just starting to kind of make national news. And so now, looking at it a decade later, like, there's funding, there's opportunity, there's a focus on bringing manufacturing and creativity and technology back to the United States as opposed to outsourcing engineering to China. And so there's been a massive a massive explosion of these spaces in high schools and even elementary schools now, and libraries. So it's a great opportunity. And as you heard, speaking to Joel, like, he's one of the forefront guys, so he's all over it.
Yeah, he's just about to go off around the Navajo Nation for 4 weeks.
He's got a trailer, he's running around, he's got a mobile makerspace he's running around in. So like I say, it's positive, but it's taken a decade or more to kind of get where we are. And the counterpoint to Ireland is that for Ireland being as tech savvy as everyone is here, like all the engineering, all the med tech, makerspaces oddly are not a thing in Ireland.
No, they're
And you're
not.
talking about bureaucracy, and I've heard it's probably a bureaucracy issue in terms of like insurance is probably really tough to insure if you're not a university. So it'd be really hard for an independent Fab Lab or Makerspace to pop up because of that concern. But we desperately need Ireland desperately needs spaces like this to engage students and to even give them options where maybe college isn't for them necessarily, right? Maybe it's a trade school and they want to learn how to, say, sweat a pipe, or they want to learn how to build a chair, right? They may be brilliant woodworkers and brilliant designers, but maybe, the formal route of learning history and everything else isn't necessarily for them.
Yeah.
And so Ireland needs makerspaces. Europe needs makerspaces, but
And you're going to
Ireland
bring
in particular needs makerspaces.
Wow. Yeah, and I mean I may be completely wrong, but the only thing that even pops into my head when you describe that kind of thing, is that there's a thing called men's sheds.
Yep.
I don't know whether you come across the men's sheds movement, and I think it started out as a kind of support movement for just providing mostly psychological support for lonely guys who didn't have any social connections and stuff. But I think a lot of those men's sheds kind of have a makerspace element in them, don't they? That people, they can go and they can do stuff together and and whatever. So that's the only thing that I can think of, that I know of in Ireland, that, or the UK really, that would mesh into that idea. It's a super idea. I mean, is it not just kind of Yoda heads and chess pieces, kind of making learning a 3D printer and stuff? I mean, is there any real benefit to this, or is this just like like you say, kind of a space for nerds who want to make things?
I think it's everything sort of starts out that way, right? The internet sort of started out that way, and everything from Reddit and AOL chat boards and things like that all started out with people that were gaming or into like D&D or some very particular sort of nerdy skill, and it grew, right? Reddit's the number one site on the internet, and it has a ton of different interests and stuff. But I think that it's kind of a negative stigma that these spaces are just for nerds. I think it has harm in like making them seem unapproachable.
Yeah.
The idea is that you'll maybe walk into this sort of darkly lit dungeon, and every, the nerds like scatter and they, they quickly pull their 20-sided die and, away from you. And they're like an outsider, but no, they're doing maker spaces for elementary school kids. These are places where you can engage technologies like 3D printing, and there is some element of making Yoda heads and Pokemon and things like that. But the key is that you're starting someplace that's familiar, and then you're exploring territory and gently sort of going into the unfamiliar. Because if I was really I'm not in Pokemon, but if I was really into Pokemon, if I have access to a 3D printer, what am I going to do? I'm going to go and I'm going to Google Pokemon files for 3D printing. I'll probably download a Pikachu and then start printing it, right? Because I know it. But what that allows me to do is, once I get that nailed down, I can say, oh, well, maybe I need a box maybe I want a card holder for all my Pokemon cards, right?
Mm.
So I'm start Googling, 3D printed files for playing card holders.
Yeah.
Maybe I can't find one. Maybe I modify my own. Maybe I create one. And I say, oh, okay. Well, now I have this tool that I can use to create sort of anything, as long as I can design it or download it. I can create it, and I can start sort of letting my imagination take off from there. Because I started on a project that was interesting to me, kind of a nerdy passion or a hobby, and I got it. I've had people in the past come to me who were auto enthusiasts. I used to live close to one of the world's largest private auto collections. So guys would come to me in Fab Lab Tacoma and say, hey, I've got this part from this classic Mustang that they don't make anymore, but I can't find, I need it. It broke, but I can't find the dang thing on eBay, or it's obscenely priced. And at this point, I don't really care about authenticity for this, but can you make this for me? I've heard 3D printers can make things.
Yeah.
And so what we'll do is at that point, we would either make it for them or show them how to do it and say, hey, look, if you have one of these parts,
we can scan it.
Make you one, right? I'll give you another sort of practical example, right? When I lived at home with my mom years back, and I just got into Fab Lab and had 3D printers and things like that. She had a stove that had broken. So I don't know what you call it here, but like a hob or whatever, and it had one of these little knobs on the front.
Yes, of course. That gets cracked or had fallen off.
Cracked or falls off or gets lost or something, right? And she's like, "Hey, can you see if you can find one of these?" And I'm looking and I'm searching through eBay, and these things are like $30 or $40 a piece.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm like, okay. I think I can do this. I'm like, okay. So I go back to my room. I get a little pair of calipers, and I take one of the other ones off. And I'm looking at this thing, and I'm like, okay, I can do this. And so like I start measuring with my little calipers and writing it down. And then I jump onto this program called Tinkercad, which is a CAD computer-aided drafting for kids. And it's completely free. And so I jump on this thing, and in about 20 minutes, I've managed to sort of whip up a cylinder and sort of extrude the little edges. And I have this model, and it's completely accurate to the one I'm holding in my hand. And then I hit download, and I download it to a little memory card, and I stick it in the printer and load up the filament, hit print. And, about 40 minutes later, I end up with a little duplicated,
you say load up the filament. For those of people who aren't familiar with a 3D printer and are scratching their head and saying, what?
Yeah, like, what is this deal? Yeah.
What's a 3D printer and filament? Because not everybody understands what these things are. Yeah.
So I can, unfortunately, with the way Zoom is here, I can't bring the 3D printer into this room. But what I can do is show you a little bit about it. So here's the sort of easiest way to explain it. Have you ever like made a cake before, or cupcakes where you're using icing? Right? Yes. And then whenever you ice a cupcake, or you're trying to like write happy birthday on a cake, what you would do is you would take a piping bag. So you put your little sugar and your mixture into your piping bag, and piping bag. And that piping bag has a little either a plastic or a little metal tip at the end.
That's right, with different shapes in and stuff.
It's a different shape, like it may be a star, it may be like a little flat deal, right? And so what you would do is you would put your piping in there, and then you would squeeze it.
Yeah.
And you would write your name, happy birthday, on the top of your cake, right? And what it does is it squeezes out the frosting in that shape, right? Whatever shape the nozzle is, it just sort of makes a snake in that shape. So if I were to challenge you, if you were going to bake me a cake, and I said, hey, maybe I don't want happy birthday on my cake. Maybe I'm a guy who likes walls. I want you to build me, I love castles. I want you to build me a castle on this cake using only frosting.
Okay. Right.
So,
okay. Yeah.
So I assume what you would do is you'd look at it and you go, okay, well, I've got my piping bag, and I've got my little tip that makes little flat sort of a, snake extrusion. And what would you do? You would take the piping bag and you go, and you'd make a line,
and then go
up a little bit more, and then you'd make another line on top of that, and then you make it up another line and go this way until you had a square that's the shape of a castle, right, or wall, right? And that would be you making a wall or a castle out of frosting.
3D castle, yeah, that's
3D, right?
Yeah.
So that is essentially what the most common type of 3D printer does.
Right.
Instead of frosting, though, you're using hot plastic.
Okay.
So replace the plastic replace the icing with hot plastic, and replace the bag with a motor and a gear that basically feeds it through a hot nozzle and moves all over. And instead of you controlling it by your hands, it's controlled by code, and you have yourself a 3D printer.
3D printer. So this is what, like a roll, like a roll of hose. The plastic.
Here we go, right here. So here, I'll turn off. Okay, I'll turn off my my thing here. Give me 1 second here, just so you can see me. Oh, sorry, wrong thing. Let me choose my filter. Choose video filter, virtual background. So forgive me. Okay, here we go.
That's it.
Easier to see. Okay.
Okay, you've got
So
the roll of
first,
filament there.
I
Yeah.
have the filament here. So this filament is a special type of plastic. It's referred to as a thermoplastic, but it is this is PLA. So
Right.
it's polylactic acid. A lot of things are made of this plastic.
Right.
It's a bioplastic, so it's typically made from corn,
Okay.
and it is, in some respects, biodegradable.
Right.
Can require some special processing, but is sort of biodegradable. It's food safe. So this is the plastic here, and it comes on these rolls. And so
Right.
you got this little roll here, and these rolls are sold in about I think they're sold in like 0.5 kilo and 1 kilo weights.
Yeah.
And this here, it says there's a little label on this thing, and it says it's black PLA, and it's 1.75 millimeters. So that's the thickness. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so what it does is you feed it into the machine, and it's on the spool. So say it's on the stop here, and then this gets fed down through an extruder. And what the extruder does is what it says, it extrudes. So it goes down in the extruder. It heats up to about 200 degrees Celsius. And then what it does is it'll squish it through a nozzle, and it will deposit it in a very specific pattern that you program into it.
Yeah.
When I say program, the computer does all the work. So
yeah.
But you can make things, and I know this is sort of in the realm of kitschy sort of Pokemon stuff, but again, it's something fun. So here's something interesting. So this is but it's a squid, right?
It's squid, yeah.
And it's a bank. It's got a little thing.
Oh, so you can put little coins into it and stuff.
Well, here's the problem. And again, sort of trial by iteration. I got this file, and this file was supposed to be full size. So this thing was supposed to be about 1 foot high. Well, I didn't want to waste all the filament on something I was possibly going to screw up the first time. And so I scaled it down. And, I'm just like trying scales. I'm trying to scale it down to make sure it'll fit and not use a bunch of filament. And I scaled it too small. So I can only put pennies, US pennies and dimes.
The coins are too wide now.
The slot is too small to fit any, I can't fit a Euro piece into it. But I mean, I have this little squid guy, and he probably took, I'm going to say he probably took 4 or 5 hours to make at one of the highest resolution settings. But you can tell, like, he's super like detailed. And it was my first like sort of 2-part piece where I had to I made the eye. I printed the eye in black, and then I printed it in white, and then glued them together.
Right.
And so and it has a little. You can't take it out. Oh, you can. So it has a little threaded dealie at the bottom.
Wow. And that was all made in the printer. The
thread comes out exactly like this.
Exactly like that. Yeah. Wow.
Yep. So anyways, you can make things like that, and then let's see. I have some other things here real quick. So I was going to make an electric bike and sort of experimenting with gears and things like that. And this is a gear that I printed over like a series of like 10 hours. Pretty solid.
Pretty solid.
Just for prototyping stuff. And then I have this is from a commercial 3D printer that prints with the same material, but also it takes fiberglass and lays a layer of fiberglass into almost each layer here. So it's super rigid. So this thing is a clutch lever for a motorcycle.
Yeah.
And, we talk about moving from Pokemon and kitschy stuff to real world application. 3D printing is here. 3D printing has been around for 40 years. People don't realize that. So it's a mature technology. It's, practically it's older than I am.
Coming down into the home space now. It's kind of sub-$1,000 printers now are available.
Sub $100 printers.
$100. Oh, wow.
And so what happened is about the time I started Fab Lab 10 years ago, a bunch of patents started expiring. Patents that were held by big companies like 3D Systems and Stratasys. And what that enabled was companies to start making kits for 3D printers. So they went from giant printers that were $30, $40, $50, $100,000 to suddenly this little do-it-yourself kit that came in 2,000 pieces was, I think my first printer was, maybe $1,000, 700 on sale. And so since then, obviously a lot of Chinese manufacturers have jumped in and European manufacturers. I can go and buy a 3D printer that's decent on Amazon for like $90.
Seriously.
and get started. And you can get started. Yeah.
Just to try and get your head around the ideas and stuff.
It's
19.
totally approachable. Yep.
Wow. So I mean, this is perhaps something I should be thinking of getting April and Danny kind of.
Yeah. One of my friends who's a photographer, and sort of another sort of jack of all creative trades, he's got a son who is 12 years old, and they make a 3D printer that is pretty like bulletproof, and I don't want to say idiot proof, that's not the right word.
Yeah.
It's simple to use.
Yeah.
And it has projects on it that the kids can just like use their little iPad and just like send files to it.
Yeah.
And it makes like, they have these preset things like spider rings and making card holders and like measuring cups. And like his little 12-year-old son loves this thing.
I bet he does.
Yeah. And there is no programming required.
School and say, I made this.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He shows me, he's got his 12-year-old to Instagram, but like he's got little, he's showing little pictures on Facebook of the little things he makes. And yeah, it's amazing.
Wow, you must send me the link and we'll put that in the show notes because I'm sure people would be interested in looking at that. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. That's amazing. So let's stay on the question of kind of, makerspace nerds. Okay. So we've gone from Yoda heads to squids.
Yeah.
And from squids to gear arms and stuff like that, things that are actually real, that maybe have a real use.
Yep.
So where does this take us in terms of education, helping people into a new job, for instance, or, repivoting or whatever?
Well, I mean, what would you say if I said it could take you to space? Right.
Okay.
So I was blessed enough to be able to make some good connections. And a couple of years ago, I made some connections with a friend who was an engineer at Blue Origin, right? So Bezos is rocket shot, right? And so we did a tour, and of course, we're under NDA at the time there of the specifics, but one thing they stressed was, hey, we are using 3D printing in manufacturing of a lot of engine components, a lot of the nozzles and things, and here's why. Yes, we can have an engineer, turn this out on a lathe or a big piece of computer controlled machinery traditionally. They said, but 3D printing allows us to get accuracy that we haven't had before. Moreover, we can iterate if there's a part that we make doesn't fit or doesn't, needs to change really quick. It doesn't take weeks to make this thing. We can have it done in a few hours or maybe a couple of days using a large 3D printer. And they're not printing out of plastic; they're printing out of metal.
Yeah, these things lay metal down, don't they?
Oh, yeah. So it's like it's this whole crazy process. But yeah, essentially, they're making metal, they're making rocket parts. So 3D printing isn't just Pokemon. It's like legit, like racing parts. So whenever we did work as a service bureau at my makerspace, we would have clients come in all the time that were doing motorcycle racing. They were doing bikes, and we could print out a carbon fiber. And the carbon fiber pieces that we could print were 30% of the weight of aluminum, but the same tensile strength. And so, like, that's legit pieces. Oh yeah, you can. I made it for me. I'm a amateur photographer, and so I've made GoPro mounts out of carbon fiber that are like
I do photography, and I'm thinking about my camera gear and thinking about L brackets and stuff that you could print yourself and be much lighter than the ones that. Yeah,
exactly. And so the thing is, and I think in my thing, the problem with 3D printing, and I don't know if it's a problem, but it's easy to get into, like, once you have this machine that can make many things, like it's like whenever you're only given a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? And so like you're like, I can 3D print this and do this and the other thing. So yes, that's true. It will have a ton of applications once you get it, but moreover, when I want to stress whenever I start teaching people how to 3D print things is like, this is cool. This is technology. It has a lot of solutions, but it's not the solution to every problem.
No.
So there are things where traditional manufacturing, hands-on, say woodworking, or just getting out there and making a rough jig with, slapping two pieces of metal together, that's going to be better than 3D printing. Or in mass manufacturing, we're talking like, if I want to go make an iPhone case, I'm not going to and sell it maybe commercially or even do a Kickstarter, right? I'm not going to make 10,000 of these on a 3D printer. That's super inefficient. I'm going to make a mold, test it out on a 3D printer, get my concept going, get money coming in, because they're like, hey, I have this real concept, this physical thing, this iPhone case I've created. And then you're going to go to a manufacturer who does injection molding.
Yeah.
And they're going to be able to crank out 1 million of these things. And so
that's right.
The right technology for the right application. But to me, the key learning part here is whenever I get excited about this technology, is showing how things connect and where there are inefficiencies and where there are learning opportunities. So to say, hey, this, this tool now, here's the next tool that you can kind of dovetail into this.
Yeah.
And here's the strengths and weaknesses of this guy. Here's the strengths and weaknesses of this guy. But together, you can make something that really works and really, sees your vision come to life.
Yeah. I can see. I remember doing in the Innovation Academy that they set us one of these crazy tasks, where you have to have 2 chairs 4 feet away from each other.
Yeah.
And they gave you 3 sheets of paper and a ping pong ball, and you had to
figure it out.
You had to figure it out. And I can imagine kind of setting up an exercise like that, where you've got to get something from one side of the room to the other, and you've got to make, say, 2 things with your 3D printer that'll help go or something. I mean, I can just only imagine the creative applications of something like that. That you are going to have so much fun.
Okay, so one of the big things, I guess I don't want our focus to be solely on 3D printing, and it tends to happen with sort of this new, but when technology gets a spotlight, right? Because it's exciting, people don't know how it works. There's lots of medical applications and stuff. But I guess what I'd really like to say is, technology doesn't have to be intimidating, and it doesn't have to be as sort of complex as a 3D printer to get people to learn. So I have a story where when people would come into my makerspace just off of the street, they would come in and it's really easy to get overwhelmed, right? They walk in, their eyes get real big, and they go, wow, look at all this stuff. What can I do? And then you get this crisis of choice, because they come in and they're like, oh, I can 3D print, and I can use the vinyl cutter, I can use a laser cutter, I can learn to weld. But if you don't give them a project or direction, they just get overwhelmed when they do nothing. Right. And so instead, what I would do is I would break it down and say, hey, guys, what I want you to do is just start with something simple. So here's how I'm going to show you how to design a coaster with your name on it.
Yes.
Right? We're going to make a circle, and we're going to put your name on it, and we're going to cut it out on the laser cutter. And I say, here's this laser cutter. It is a giant $30,000 machine, but I'm like, you might as well see this thing as a black and white printer. I can literally print an Excel spreadsheet to this laser cutter if I wanted to, because all it sees is just sees another printer.
Yep.
So approachable, right? If you can print Excel spreadsheet, I can teach you to use this laser cutter. And so what I would do is get them started on a short, and this is like a 10-minute deal. I would open up a program. I would make a circle, tell them to type their name on it. I said, okay, now we're going to send this to laser cutter, and you can watch it use fire and light to cut out your little coaster out of acrylic or out of a piece of wood. And in the way of explaining, it's like, whoa, I can do this, right? I put my name, I made a thing. And so they would watch this burn. I said, hey, look, there's obviously some safety stuff. So I began to explain a little bit about the safety, but I'd say, here's how this thing works. I said, it sees it like a black and white printer, but I'm like, see this little carriage that's moving back and forth and shooting the laser? I'm like, you remember graphing from when you were in, maybe junior high? You're making a coordinate system, you go to 1, 1 and -5 or whatever. This is how this machine sees this. It's taking every single little dot in your name, and it's assigning a coordinate system to it and saying, okay, well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to fire it says, okay, fire the laser at this intensity at this coordinate, at say -1, 1. It says, then continuing fire the laser at this intensity and this power, move at this rate of speed, and go to coordinate 5, 5. And when the laser goes, whoop,
I know,
and I'm like, now do that 1,000 times. And suddenly it's drawn out your name, and it's drawn out a circle, and it's cut it out. Like, that's all it is. Because if you can understand how that laser cutter is issuing commands and saying, just move from this coordinate to this coordinate at this intensity and this speed, suddenly you've learned to use 2D computer controlled machinery.
So you're making stuff, but you're also learning logic, and you're learning flow, and you're learning programming,
Yeah,
and you're
and there is,
learning
well, there, in this sense though, there's no
everything in it.
programming. All
Yeah.
I'm doing is just saying, hey, look, here's how the computer sees it. All it sees is a circle with your name in it, and that's what it's doing. But here's what's going on kind of behind the scenes. But the good thing is though, is once you learn how to design your name and put it in the middle of a circle for a coaster, I could say, okay, now we're going to make a box. Now I want you to make a box, and I want you to put a flower in the middle of it, or a heart, and give it to your sweetie.
Oh yeah.
So they go from that to making something that's a little bit artistic, right? And then from there, I say, hey, look, you've learned how to use the laser cutter. Now here's the plasma cutter. The plasma cutter uses the exact same principle as the laser, but instead of cutting stuff out of wood and acrylic, we're now going to cut stuff out of metal.
Wow. Yeah.
And so it works on the same coordinate system, and it works the same way, but you have one other variable to start to think about, and it's where you start the cut. And so I would move from there and say, hey, once you learn the plasma cutter, now let's start thinking about 3D. You're moving in 2 coordinates, right? You're making graphs and making squiggles. You're moving in, on a single plane, right?
Yeah.
Now let's take that to 3D printing, because now let's add in a Z coordinate. So instead of X and Y, you're suddenly got height.
Yeah.
We'll go back to the example of me or of you making a little castle for me out of frosting. I said, that's what's happening. And there is no programming anymore in this. You can certainly program, and if you want to dive in, but you can the software is smart enough to figure it all out for you.
Yeah.
So all you literally need to do is take your little design or somebody else's design, pop it into the program, tell it what kind of machine you have and what kind of filament it's loaded with, hit go, and it will print away, and you will end up with something like this in a few minutes or a couple hours.
Amazing. And I mean, I saw Apple tell us at one of their events 6 months ago or something, that you can now use your phone to just like scan an object.
Yep.
And it'll generate that file, and you can use that file now, can't you? So you don't even have to have CAD skills or anything to actually create these things.
Yep. You don't even need real CAD skills. I mean, they're certainly helpful, but if you want to jump in, like you can certainly jump in. And that's my goal with the Innovation Academy. I know we haven't talked too much about the Innovation Academy, but that's my goal, is to make technology approachable,
right,
and to make it useful, right? It's not technology for just technology's sake. It's like, this is fun, this is engaging, but also has like a practical use. We want to move beyond the Pokemon to like actual things, but it's how do you get people engaged first? Give them something they're passionate about, have a hobby, or ask them about their hobbies, see if they can see an application for this in their real life, something that solves maybe a real annoyance or problem in their life. And then we'll move on to solving global warming. It's like, let's make some steps to get you started. And then we can start to think about big picture stuff once we have an idea of how the capabilities of some of these tools. So
I love this. So you've spent all this time, you did Costco and kind of regular job, and you were doing the MakerSpace stuff, and then you come over to Ireland to do an MBA. Why did you do an MBA?
So I want to tell you one thing. So how crazy was my life 10 years ago? So this is before I was married. So when I worked at Costco, I put 14 years in at Costco, and a majority of that time was at their buying office in Issaquah, Washington, which is close to Seattle. I live 40 miles south of the buying offices. So I would leave in the morning at 5 a.m. and drive either 45 minutes or 2 hours, depending on if I hit my traffic window, to the corporate headquarters. I would sleep in my electric car while I was charging for a couple hours. And then I would go to work from 8 to 4:30. I would then make a 2-hour commute back to Tacoma, where my newly opened Fab Lab was. And I would work from 6:30 to 10:30 at night, because it's the life of an entrepreneur, right? I'm like one of 2 people that own this place and work there. And so during all that time, like I had to learn how to use a laser cutter. I had to learn how to 3D print because we didn't have anybody else.
No, so you have to be,
So,
yeah, that's right. That's entrepreneurship. Yeah, yeah,
and it gets you because I had to teach the classes because
yeah.
because there was nobody else at that time, and I dang well better be sure I know what I'm doing, to be able to teach class. And sometimes it would be like me studying and then going to teach a class, but that's the excitement of this stuff. That is like that's the price of being on the cutting edge, right? And so just being an entrepreneur, living the hard life, working 90 million hours a week. And then I got married and my wife was like, no, you're not, like, I need to see you at some point in your life.
Yeah. She actually wanted to see you as well. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, so I went through the whole thing at Costco. Just decided that commuting life wasn't for me and had a little bit of a fallout with just a career setback there. And just decided like, hey, like this isn't me anymore. Like I need to engage people and not yell at them over prices and chasing shipping containers from China. Like it's fun, but that's not a great use of my time. And so I said, gosh, maybe I should be looking at higher education and MBA. And my wife said, you went to Ireland about a decade ago as a junior in college, didn't you? Because I did this little study abroad thing in Ireland. We went to Galway and all over the place. And little 19-year-old William was like, oh, Galway's really nice. If I ever get my higher degree, this would be a fun place to go. And so what do you know? I had the opportunity and engaged NUIG here, and they pulled me along and pulled all the strings to get me to do my MBA here. And I've been living here 2 years, got my MBA, and Innovation Academy scooped me up before I graduated.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, so that was why Galway then, because you'd done.
That's why Galway, yeah.
Because I mean, I thought, why does somebody from Tacoma kind of end up in Galway?
It was because the little 19-year-old me was impressed with.
Yeah. Well, now, although I shouldn't diss Galway because in 3 days' time we're heading off to Galway for a week on holiday. So yeah.
Yeah, so that's the connection there. It was merely because I had a study abroad opportunity for a month, and I was enamored with Ireland and just the friendliness of people here and them being so really technology based. And it was just a great timing,
Oh wow! So I mean, if we've got 5-10 minutes left, then so what about the Innovation Academy and this new role? Where are you going to operate? Have you got a room somewhere?
Oh yeah, no, I will be in Dublin, and so I'm just kind of working that out now. But
have you got to start from scratch? Have you got to assemble all the machinery? And
I've been ordering machinery like a madman to kit out this makerspace.
Yeah.
And we've got a lot of exciting stuff coming. Everything from carbon fiber 3D printers to vacuum forming machines to a giant laser cutter, and we even have some augmented reality stuff coming in as well soon.
Oh, Morris will be very happy with that.
Yeah. And so 3D printing. There's a sustainability aspect in everything we do. We want to make sure that generating things like this or even happy little mistakes can be used somehow. So we've actually engaged this company from Italy, and they make a little filament recycling box thing. And what it does is it takes your little stuff, and you can grind it up. And you can re-extrude it into that filament I showed you.
Yeah.
So you can recycle your stuff.
So you won't be throwing out all the duds and stuff. You can just reuse.
We may still have a wall of shame because I think that's like valuable for learning, and that you have this wall of failed prints. But some of them will be on the wall. Some of them will make it into something else, hopefully.
Brilliant. And are you hoping to incorporate this into existing programs with the Innovation Academy, or are you going to be doing separate programs, or what's the plan there?
So I'm going to be teaching a class called Designing for the Future. And that's going to be initially it's going to be a small class. I think we're looking at, just over a dozen people. And
you'll need to do a pilot of that, William.
Yeah. Then that's how we're piloting it.
You'll need some beta testers.
Yeah. And so, yeah, certainly you may be in there assisting me. We'll see. But anyway, so we're going to have a small thing for Designing the Future. And I'm in that class. I'm going to teach students basics of 3D printing and CAD design. And then I'm also going to teach a little bit of AccuForming and a little bit of recycling as well. We talked about the filament recycler. So it'll all be very connected and very progressive in that you learn one and go to the next and keep building through. I am going to integrate with other modules. So with Morris and them, and we will probably have a day or two spent in the makerspace on a very particular task. So I may give them a design challenge of one of the things I love doing is this like kind of bonsai challenge. So I say, hey, I've got a client and they really like bonsai trees, but they're looking into going to they're setting up an Etsy shop and they really want to get bonsai to the world. But the thing is they're tired of these regular square shaped planters. So as a client, they're coming to me and I'm coming to you and saying, I want you to design a planter that holds 1 liter of soil, but is not a square. It can be a heart. It can be a bunny rabbit. It can be a squid. Sky's the limit. But I want you to design it using the CAD software that you have available. And then I want you to prototype it on the 3D printer. And this is all due in 3 weeks.
Oh my goodness. So they've got to learn all the skills of the whole kind of design cycle.
It's entirely possible.
Yes. Yeah.
And so that's the idea. And I want to get people to engage, specifically a lot of business students, to engage in that client relationship, because a lot of people will come out of, not necessarily business school, but they'll come out of different programs and not have any idea how to interact with the other silos or really clients, right? And so you may have all these clients have all their crazy expectations, and you may have your ability, but you need to be able to communicate to the client and say, okay, let's bring it down to reality here. Like, here's what's possible. Here's the time frame that's possible. Let's see if it works within your budget. And that's a really valuable skill. And that is something that I hope to teach in a lot of my lessons and a lot of interactions, to be able to interact with people, to explain things clearly, to make changes on the fly, and to not, lose your hair over it.
Yes. Yeah. And you may lose your hair over it because I mean, when you're dealing with clients, you're going to lose your hair sometimes. But I mean, that's fine. That's okay. Yeah.
So that's the big mess. I am still working it out, obviously, but that's kind of what what I hope to achieve, at least partially, through.
You are going to fit in. You are going to fit in so well in the Innovation Academy.
I see their little tendrils. Everybody's little tendrils on the team is like reaching into the makerspace and like, we can do this and that and the other thing. And I'm like, okay, bring it on.
Yeah. How many hours a week are you contracted to do, William?
I'm full time, but we'll see how that goes.
Full time. Yeah. That's amazing.
But I may have to sleep there at some point. We'll see.
Yeah, well, you can make yourself a little 3D printed bed, can't you?
Cheaper than Dublin rent, I'm telling you. Jeez.
So you're plus one. The podcast, the thing is kind of like, what do we change in our own practice? What one little thing to do or to change in our practice? And yours was, I mean, you said don't be afraid of technology. You got to jump at some point.
Not just don't be afraid of technology, but there's so many online resources out there, everything from YouTube videos to, I'm part of several groups on Facebook that are about 3D printing or laser cutting, subreddits. It's not as scary as people make it out to be. And I think that, take a chance to learn a new skill, watch some YouTube videos and get going on things. Like I said, these things are very approachable. You can get $150 safe 3D printer. And even if you get the kit and you start messing around with it and you can't figure it out, just reach out to people online. There are plenty of passionate people in the community, people like Joel, who will sit with you over Zoom and they will help you get that thing up and running and get your first little widget printed. Don't be afraid. There are tons of resources out there, and don't be afraid to ask for help, and don't be afraid to just jump in. It's easy to say with technology that, I got to get the next big thing. And there's always going to be something else. But at some point you just need to jump in with both feet. Just do it. Start out, Make your
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, this whole podcast thing. I mean, I'd never done a podcast, and it just came to me at the beginning of this fellowship. Kind of,
Yep. That's how most
right,
podcasts start.
just going to do it, just try it. And I mean, it'll probably crash and burn, but what the hell? Just let's have a go. And it's amazing. I mean, one person said they were too busy to come on the podcast of everybody that I've asked. And and I've connected with people and made new friends and new relationships, and there's stuff feeding into my teaching. And so you're right. I mean, this thing about just don't be afraid to ask, reach out to people. It comes back, doesn't it? It's amazing.
You can learn virtually anything, good and bad, online. And some of it is filtering through all the noise and all the garbage. But like I said, if you join the right community, we can steer you in the right direction. And that's another one of the goals of the Makerspace, right? I'm going to be there. I'm going to be on campus. If you aren't even part of the Innovation Academy, if you're just a student or even just like a regular person off the street, like, come in. If you say, hey, I've got a 3D printer that's just printing blobs, come in. I'll take time. I will help you get it up and running.
Yeah.
Don't be afraid.
Oh my goodness.
Well, I think I'll figure it out.
There's a 3D printer in my future now. I can see that, especially now I've got you to reach out to.
Once you get my bill, though.
Yeah, and Danny and April will be thrilled as well, because I'm sure they'll be really into this. Listen, thank you so much for taking the time, William. It's been great having you on the podcast and such a different take on things. So that's wonderful. I'm really looking forward to working with you as we move forward.
Yep, and I too. Everybody I meet in the Innovation Academy is just amazing, and they're just. People say I'm passionate, and maybe it's because I'm loud, but like they're truly like passionate, and not just passionate, but like talented people, and so that's what's crazy to me. So
it's a buzz. Yeah, you're going to fit right in. It's going to be great. Okay, well we'll draw it to a close there. So thank you very much, William Davis.